We're going to talk a little bit today about deep fakes. I did put a link to a video that I did, just a quick kind of demo video in the track one on Discord there. If you want to check it out later, I will reference that later along with another link that people tend to ask me when I talk about this. So we'll get into things here in a minute. A little bit about myself. IT and security guy. Been doing this since, gosh, the 1990s is when I got started. Ended up the security manager at the Second Regional Cyber Center Western Hemisphere for the US Army. I was a contractor there for about 10 years, but I've worked in all kinds of different areas. I've worked in medical, I've worked in large scale manufacturing, an aerospace manufacturing place. If you have a CISSP, I was the Director of Member Relations and Services for ISC Squared for a couple years. And I used to write questions for the CISSP and the ISSAP. So I might have caused you some headaches. Fortunately here, you can't throw tomatoes at me. So pretty happy with that. That being said, I work for KnowBe4. We do a security awareness training and simulated phishing platform. That's what we do, based out of Tampa here. Love it down here. Weather's kind of nice, although a little bit damp the last couple days. Been raining pretty good. But what we do and why this matters is we get to see a lot of the scams that are going on, a lot of the things that are happening in the world, and a lot of the trends, because we get to see a lot of like the phishing emails and that sort of thing. And I talk to a lot of customers that come on board after something bad has happened, and it's eye-opening to see the kinds of things that are going on out there. It's pretty amazing. So in this talk, this is what we're going to do. This is kind of the agenda, how we got started with this talk, the progression of digital fakes, potential impact detection, and defending against it. Now, if you have questions, here's the deal. I'm not going to be able to pop back and forth into Discord right now to be able to do it, but I will be at the track afterwards. So I'll be in track one for a little bit afterwards to answer any questions. I know it can be a little bit of a challenge jumping windows, so don't worry about it too much. If you do have a question, maybe you pop it in there and I'll deal with it afterwards. But anyways, that being said, let's move on. How did this get started? This is an interesting talk for me. And I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I used to be very heavy into photography. As a matter of fact, I still every once in a while get like a royalty check for stock photography that I have out there that's for sale. I've been very into digital imaging and graphics. It's something that actually got me started in computers when I was in the Navy. I was on the USS America. I was an avionics tech. I used to fix radar jammers. And one of the guys on the ship had this really cool computer. It was an Amiga 500, I believe, 5000, I don't remember. But it was an Amiga. I remember that. And he had this really cool handheld scanner that you could take pictures. And if you've ever done this, man, you know what I'm talking about. You click a button and then you roll the scanner across the picture. Now, it's really easy to get it all messed up. It's not like the flatbeds we have today. But it fascinated me that we could now take the photography aspect I was doing with film, digitize it, and then modify it. It just blew my mind to see this sort of thing. So I got out of the Navy, had to wait a few years because this is back in the days, folks, when like a 386 computer was starting around 3,000 bucks. It was ridiculous back in these days. But I really got into the digital thing. Well, I've been following digital imaging over the years and been playing around with it in different ways, just as kind of a side hobby. But one of the things that kind of drove this is not only my love for that, but I'm good friends with Javad Malik. And him and I, we go back and forth. We love to mess with each other all the time, right? We play pranks on each other. We mess with each other all the time. Well, we've been doing some stuff on WhatsApp, and we were chatting. And what we would do is we would take something that somebody said, and we would, basically just copy it out and rearrange it digitally and put it back in and go, man, I can't believe you said this, And we started just twisting what we were saying. We started making it look like we were saying really, really bad things to each other. So at some point in time, we kind of reached that point of mutually assured destruction with the HR group, right? Like if this ever went to HR, we'd both be exploded because, it's stuff we didn't say, but it would be pretty good. And we started thinking about that. We started going, man, this could really be used against people. And then we started talking about how imaging works and he does a lot of videos. I do more with photography, but we started talking about how easy it is to tweak this and mess with this. Well, I had already been dabbling a little bit in deepfake stuff, and so I was like, man, let's see what we got here, you know. And so I started playing with it a little bit, and I found that it was amazingly easy to do things with deepfake technology. And then, you know, thinking about the ways that it could be used against us was just kind of ugly. So that's kind of where this started. So I'm gonna go into kind of the progression of digital fakes. So we're going to start kind of at the beginning. I'm going to show you some different ways that this can happen. Not all fakes are bad, but a lot of them can be used for malicious purposes if you really want them to. So I'm going to start with Javad's chart because he's a smart guy. He was a researcher with 451 for a while, and he's great at putting together quad charts. In the left side is the static stuff, right? The photos, and the top is the shallow. Now, the way we differentiated this to deep is really kind of applying the AI portion to it. So in the top left, you know, you have the text manipulation, like what we were doing. You got the photo editing or adding filters and photoshopping. In the middle over there, as you get more dynamic, is the green screen stuff. You know, we're all becoming pros with green screen and Zoom, right? All of our digital meetings have, oh, at least in the beginning, everyone is putting wacky stuff up behind them. I think we hopefully have bored of that a little bit, but then you got the jib jab style, and then on to full CGI. Now, getting down into the AI stuff, you have the declothing, the face swap, the people that don't even exist on the really deep static part. How many of you seen those AI created photos of people that they really don't even exist? It was AI that put it together. And some of those, some of those are really, really bad, like it's nightmarish type stuff. But there's some in there that are just amazing, and it's not even a person, but the AI put that together. Pretty cool stuff. Then you get the face swaps over there, and then full on puppetry, right? So this is kind of the dynamic. The important thing to remember is, you know, we're kind of drawing the line when you get into the AI part of it, and that's the difference between the deep and shallow stuff. So simple image manipulation. There's things you can do, removing people from busy locations. I'll show you that. Tilt shift, force perspective. And remember that, you know, we can use just simple images to modify screenshots as well as photos. So again, you can screenshot something and say, this is what that person said, take it to HR, and that person probably doesn't have a screenshot of what they actually said, right? And so the information is stacked against you. It's one way that this can be leveraged. Now, image stacking is really cool. When I first got started in digital imaging, there were ways to do this, but it was very manual. And essentially what you do is you go to a location that's very busy, right? And you set up like a tripod there, and you just start taking pictures over time. And what happens is people move around in the frame. So eventually what you have is all of the digital information when the people have moved out of the way. Like say it's blocked one moment, and then as they move away, it's there in the next, but they block another piece, right? Well, image stacking is where you take a whole mess of those photos, and then you essentially remove those portions by replacing it with the image data that was in the other photos, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense to y'all. But by doing that, you can remove people from frames. You can remove all of the people from frames. And if you look at this and the left and the right, you even remove shadows. You even remove, you know, whatever you want to remove, you can do through this method. Now, again, you used to have to do this as a very manual process. Now it's just a script that comes with Photoshop, which blows my mind. You just boom and it's done, right? This is how mainstream it's kind of gotten there. But if you're ever, you know, touristy, you want to go to DC or something, I can tell you, you will almost never see like the Lincoln Memorial without a mass of people in front of it. But if you take your time and you wait long enough, you can piece together a photo like this. This is how we see a lot of those photos that don't have people in front of them. Just a subtle manipulation sort of thing. Now, tilt shift images, this kind of is an interesting thing for me. This takes real photos and makes them look fake. It's actually a really simple technique, and it definitely works with like drone shots. And so this is a real town. This is a real photo. So there's nobody on the streets that I can see here. Maybe they did some stuff and, you know, took a couple of shots. I don't know, or Photoshop people out. But essentially what you do here is from above, usually at about a 45-degree angle, You apply a blur filter on the top and the bottom in stripes. If you look at it, you can see how that's blurred. And then you crank up the saturation. This makes real things look unreal, which is always kind of an interesting thing. You know, real world application to mess with people on this, I don't know. But it is definitely what's becoming a more popular type of image manipulation from drone footage. Now, this one we've all seen, forced perspective, right? You got the guy with the big cup, the bucket falling over him there, and of course the super mega multi-sized dog there running at you. Um, this is one of those tricks with photography where, depending on how close or far something is from the lens, you can make a big difference. Okay. Zoom lenses can make, it can compress the depth of field and make things look much, much closer. Now, where we do see this in real world stuff is I've seen some photos that were done around COVID-19 where they were talking about people social distancing. And in some of the photos, they were taken kind of head on with a bunch of people, and it looked like they were packed together. But from some of the other angles, you could see that people are actually separated apart. It just depends on what story the photographer wanted to tell with those pictures. And that's an important thing to remember. When it comes to photos, whether it's in the news, whether it's whatever, generally speaking, a photo is meant to tell a story. What that story is can be messed with a little bit. Now, these forced perspective ones, I'm on a forum here in Florida because, well, we have snakes. We have a lot of snakes. And so people post up pictures of snakes a lot. And what they'll do is, they take a stick or something like that, and they have it way out in front of them towards the camera lens while they're standing there. And it makes the snake or the alligator or the whatever look much, much larger, kind of like the dog in the right-hand picture here. We've seen that with the camel spiders in some of the earlier shots too. The point to this is it's an easy thing to fake that actually takes no digital workmanship, but essentially setting up the shot and the equipment in a certain way. Now, we've all seen the filters, right? The face swap apps, adding cat ears in real time. How many of you remember this one, aging you by 20 or 30 years, right? There was all the hubbub about, oh, we're sending all our information to the Russians, but if you looked at that, it was remarkably good, remarkably good. Now, many of the times, this stuff is being done locally on our cell phones, which says a couple things. First of all, we got a lot more power in our hands than we, often realized or think about. This from a guy that played the snake game on a Nokia back in my younger years. But we got a lot of horsepower on our phones to be able to do some of this augmented reality stuff. We have the face swapping apps, right? These are like real time-ish. And no, they're not perfect. But Instagram and those, Facebook has these filters where you can do that. And then there's the making animals talk one as well, which is pretty interesting to see that sort of thing happen. But as these filters are getting better, we're being able to make more realistic looking stuff like that age app. I'll tell you right now that when this happened, this was a Pakistani minister's live presentation. Nobody believed those were his real cat ears. Okay. Not like the other, the aging app. It didn't look that real, but it is kind of funny that here we got a guy who's doing a live broadcasting, a minister in Pakistan, and the person forgot to take the cat ear filters off before they were live streaming it. Now it was it was funny if you watch the video, it's like moving the cat ears to different people on the panel. Not everybody would roll with this and think it's pretty funny, but if you think about it, it is a pretty powerful technology to have on our phone. If there's some Pokemon Go people here, the augmented reality there, I'll be honest, I barely saw that one, but man, that's some cool stuff. Now, talking pets, where this starts getting into some more advanced stuff. This is where we start getting a little bit more advanced. You can take a picture of your pet and you can make it talk. Very cool, right? Well, what it does is it's more than just the mouth moving. This actually takes and starts making movements around the eyebrows and the eyes and different places to better emulate that. There's a video there at that YouTube thing if you want to go check it out. But it's pretty interesting. So we're getting into more realistic stuff just with the talking pet stuff here. And it's pretty fascinating. A lot of this stuff is free or very low charge, for this tech. It's not new. It's been around for a while, but we're improving on it constantly. And so that brings me now to the video deep fake apps. There's a few of them out there. The vast majority of these things are free. They're downloadable from GitHub. That's where the ones that I've been playing with is right from GitHub. Now they're going to use a GPU to make things reasonably quick. If you try to put it on a CPU, even like on a Threadripper or something, your machine is just going to cry. There's an option to do that in some of these, but man, it's just not worth it. Most of the time, these are using NVIDIA GPUs and CUDA cores to do this. A lot of these run on like TensorFlow as the AI backend. But they're using GPU to do a lot of different things in here, including the AI piece. Now, on these video deepfake apps, what you're going to do is you're going to take a movie or a video. Now, videos, as we know, are essentially 29.97 frames per second or 30 frames per second. And it's going to take that video and it's going to break it out into individual frames. And then from each individual frame, it's going to go through and it's going to select the face around the people or of the people that are in that frame. It gets pretty ugly pretty fast, actually, when you do this and you're having to sort through the videos. You'll see an example of that here in just a second. But it basically breaks that down throughout all of these different frames and pulls those faces out. It's usually a 128 by 128 pixel square that it uses. And it uses, facial recognition to be able to pull that stuff apart. The thing with video deepfake apps is, at least all the ones that I've worked with right now, they do not modify the audio. So if you're going to be changing things, you either need to have a voiceover actor if you want to make it realistic, or some other sort of audio that you're trying to put in there to make it sound like that. Otherwise, you will have whoever originally did the video, their voice with the different face. So that is, that's the one thing. Now, there is some stuff being worked on with that too, where if we combine this, maybe it'll be different. And I'll talk about that just here in a second. Now, one of the ones I've used the most is called Deepfakes Lab. And this is where you get it from. It's on GitHub here. Windows binaries are downloadable. I believe there's a version that will run on AMD cards here. It didn't seem to make much of a difference. Now, I actually used my laptop, which is a gaming laptop. It has, I think, an NVIDIA 1080 in it. So it's a pretty beefy video card for a laptop, and it did pretty well. I've also used my desktop, which uses AMD, and it did okay as well too. None of this stuff is super fast. That's something you got to think about. I put a link, like I said, in the track one on Discord there to a deepfake video that I did side by side with Justin Ong from Spiceworks. And I basically took him and I put Elon Musk's face on him. And I did it split screen because honestly, when you look at them one at a time, it's kind of hard to tell. But by putting them side by side, you see the differences. And there are some glitches in that. There's a few there's some moments definitely in that. It's not perfect. But what's important to know on that video is I did that using absolute defaults. I did not tweak things in any way, shape, or form within, the settings on there. It was default settings. And I did that section of video. I think I ended up doing, a couple of minutes worth total. I don't think it's all up there because it, just kind of runs together. But I did a couple of minutes total. It took me about 1 day to do it. I think it was about 8 hours of AI training, 8 to 12 hours of AI training, and then, the sorting of stuff. It was very, very interesting how this works, when you look at this. And it was amazing how easily it made things work. Now, it's important. What I found is when you're doing this, you need to make sure that the both faces that you're going to use have similar structures. I found that, putting a narrow face on a wide face just don't work so well. Mustaches, beards, stuff like this can definitely be an issue with that as well. So it's not perfect by any means, but it's pretty stinking good for free and what you can do pretty quick. Now, it extracts these frames, and what it basically does is it uses AI now to build a model between the two. Okay, so you're doing frames from the source and frames from the destination, and it basically builds a model by pairing those two things together, blending them. And what happens is you end up with a video that includes eye blinks and other different facial sort of tics, which is really fascinating and lends to the realism of it. Now, we all know that, well, at least a lot of us know that a lot of this deepfake video stuff actually came from putting celebrities' faces on pornographic type videos, on adult videos. That was a big deal. Got a group or two banned from Reddit over it. That's how this kind of started, and of course, can be used for that sort of thing as well in the future. We'll talk about some of the threats with it. Now, when I'm talking about the output, you can see here, this was one I was doing with a couple folks from the Lost All the Money video. I love that video. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It's Host Unknown's Lost All the Money. But this is Javad and Tom, and this is what you end up with. You end up with a whole bunch of stuff here. Now, you have to go through and you have to filter out the stuff you don't want and just keep the faces that you do want in here. And it can be pretty brutal. So if you're going to play with this, do some short clips first. Take a video, knock it down to, you know, a minute and a half or a minute, and practice on that rather than going full length stuff, because this is probably the worst part of making deepfakes, is pulling this stuff apart like this and isolating those images. This is what the AI uses to train off of. And you can see those square pixels I was talking about for the faces. Now, moving on to the audio deepfake apps, also from GitHub, also uses the GPU to make things very, very fast. It uses the AI to replace or create the voice using audio clips that you can get, you know, things from videos, from talks, from stuff like that, to create the voice. It uses that to train. So one of the ones that I've been playing with a little bit more, and I'm seeing a lot of activity on, is this real-time voice cloning. This one right here is, it's also downloadable from GitHub. There's a link right there. It's a Python-based tool. It generates arbitrary speech in real time or near real time. It uses some pre-trained models. It's not great. Not going to lie. You can definitely hear that it's a digitized voice, but it is improving very, very quickly. On this particular repository, not a day goes by that I'm not getting notifications of people posting up stuff, trying this, trying that. There's a lot of activity in this place right now. And I think that this is something we're going to see a lot more of moving forward. And we'll talk about kind of the impact of this and how this can be a problem here in just a moment. So let's move into that. First of all, wouldn't be a cyber conference if there wasn't a Sun Tzu slide. So I did that for the obligatory Sun Tzu. All warfare is based on deception. Yes, it is. And the warfare thing is pretty strong here. I get that, right? Some people have an issue with that. But here's the deal. Especially in the industry that I'm in, which is phishing and social engineering, this stuff is being done a lot by very organized groups. There are groups doing this. There are nation states. Yes, they're nation states. There are organized crime gangs that are involved in all this social engineering stuff. This is not a bunch of just individuals, you know, in the basement drinking Mountain Dew and eating pizza. These folks are pretty serious. And what they're doing in these attacks that are related to, you know, business email compromise and things like that is oftentimes warfare. You know, we've seen terrorist organizations funding their activities through BEC sort of attacks and money taken through social engineering attacks. So yeah, it is pretty serious, but I did have to put this in there just, you know, to make sure we check that box. If you're playing like Con Bingo or something, you can check that one off now. So again, when it comes to business email compromise, man, this is a ridiculous sort of attack that's going on. Basically, you know, the CEO sends an email and says wire off a bunch of money, and the person on the other end does that. They do that because they're convinced it's the CEO. That's why they do this sort of thing. That's why they go out and they buy a bunch of gift cards and send the bad guys the gift card information, right? So this is where this kind of technology, I think, is going to be definitely leveraged. These are deception attacks. This is all about deceiving people and convincing them of some other reality. So when I talk about reality and the root of deception, I do whole talks on this piece because it's fascinating to me, our psychological aspects and how we work and do things from a psychological level and how our minds work. But our brain's job is to filter, interpret, and present reality. And I want to touch on that because we have to understand, we always assume that what we taste, what we smell, what we hear, what we see, that all of that is actually reality. And I will tell you this, our brains do an amazing job of filtering things. They do filter a lot of stuff out. For example, just if you look side to side right now with your eyes, do you see your nose? Well, the answer is probably not until you think about it, right? Why? Because your brain actually filters that out of your field of vision automatically. We're not thinking about it. These sorts of things are what's going on all the time. Look at some of these interesting things that have gone on over the years. What color is the dress? You got two people, same monitor, same lighting conditions. There are some physical things that can, that influence this, but they see the same dress in two different colors. Now, once you've seen the dress in that color, it's really, really hard to try to see it in any other color, even if you've seen the enhancements that bring that out so that everybody can see it. It's very, very hard to see that. Or how many of you remember, I'm totally going to age myself here, but those, what are they called? Stereostropic, I think stereostropic posters. Basically, it's the random shapes on a poster. And if you cross your eyes just right and you stand on one foot, like a whale pops out of this thing, like a 3D whale, right? Really crazy pictures. I've never been real good at seeing them myself, but I have caught a couple. And once you see that thing, once you see that popping out, it's really, really hard to unsee it. That's because our brain has now picked that out and it filters it when we see it. It is important to know that our filters can be exploited. There's all kinds of things that happen with our brain. So we have to understand that. And if you want to learn some stuff about brains, man, there is a series called Brain Games out there. And I want to say it's on Hulu or something right now. That is some mind-blowing stuff that they do to show just how much of our reality is actually filtered information from our brains being basically fed to our cognizant self. Fantastic show to watch. So when it comes to video or photo fakes, what can these be used for? What is the attacks that can be done? Well, romance scams. If you've ever known anyone dealing with a romance scam, these are bad, right? And so what do? You tell somebody, well, have them, drink a cup of tea with their pinky out, okay? And have them send you a picture. That way it's them. Well, with some of this deep fake stuff, you could probably even fake some of that. Now, the trick is in a lot of romance scams, they will use a photo of somebody who's either famous or, doing well in one way or another as the basis of the romance scam. Or it'll be a celebrity like, oh, the grandparents are going, oh, Yanni has a sudden interest in me, or whatever. And so by doing this, though, they could actually fake those sorts of things. This is like the proof of life things. When you have a ransom incident, a physical ransom incident, proof of life, you could actually fake those sorts of things. What about outrage clickbait? Okay, so what about clickbait? What about putting up ads that show somebody doing something that is absolutely absurd and then saying, come vote this joker out or do whatever, or come sign this petition. And then, of course, when you go to sign the petition, they have to make sure you're a legitimate person, right? And so they're going to ask you for your name, your address, your social security number, the name of your first pet, your mother's maiden name, right? You get the idea, right? So they can use that to get people to click on things, to gather information. And the last one too, not last by any means, but the bullet on here, election influencing. You may or may not realize this. We have an election coming up here in the US, and it's going to be a hell of an election. Imagine if one side or the other, or both sides, start dropping some of these things right near the election. That's so absurd. Like, this or that. And I don't even want to go into details here, but you can imagine some of the things that can be made up. This goes out, it gets spread through everybody. Everybody goes, oh my gosh. And then they go throw their votes, and then it's disproved, hard disproved, by then the damage is already done. That's what I worry about, what's coming up with respect to that. Now, just to give you an idea how some of these things can be kind of weaponized against somebody, here is one of the British royalty. And that's probably not a very royal thing to be doing, right? Imagine the headlines that kind of go along with something like this. Well, if you actually look at it, this is what he's doing. Okay. Um, but you can see how that can be weaponized. He's counting to three. Apparently, he needs his fingers there to do that. But he's counting to three, apparently. But you can see how from the other angle, this can be construed as something very, very different. And this could have long-lasting effects, honestly. Also, you might have noticed there's been a little bit of tension going on in the world these last couple of months, right? We got a pandemic, we've got riots, we've got protests, peaceful protests. We got all kinds of stuff going on. It's madness. I mean, we really are kind of in the apocalypse right now, it feels like. But using social media platforms to take these fakes and amplify them is something that is absolutely going to be happening. No doubt about it. We know that the bad actors and nation states especially are playing games out there already in social media as a way to divide people. You see here on one of the studies, more than half of the social media posts about George Floyd were from fake accounts being troll and or bot accounts. And then the one on the right about COVID, coronavirus, this was done by Carnegie Mellon. They found that almost half of the accounts tweeting about it were bots or had bot-like activities. Okay, that's pretty significant. And what happens here is people see something that aligns with their beliefs and they amplify that message, but they're being blown out by these bots. Now, in a curious thing, in some of these cases, the same bots were actually seen spreading information on both sides. And what they found in, I believe it was the coronavirus one there on the right, in one of these two studies, they were talking about how this essentially mimics the playbooks of China and Russia and possibly even Iran. It's sowing discord in there. Well, imagine if you're taking these fakes that are very believable and very real, the amount of damage that could be done in a short amount of time by making a believable something out there. Now, this sucks because, quite frankly, I don't know what to believe anymore. I'll be perfectly honest with you. It is so hard to try to believe anything you see anymore. And the more I delve into this, the more I realize how hard it is to understand and even to prove some of the sources on this stuff. It's a matter of being very, very safe and trying to do what you can with it. But it's very tough. These digital manipulation things that we're talking about are a great way to do that. I mentioned how, I saw some photos in the coronavirus and they had people stacked. It looked like they were just elbow to elbow when in fact, turning to the side, they weren't. These are the things. Remember, a photo, a video, these things are being done to tell a story. And the story is being whatever it is that person wants to tell you. It's important to look around both edges of that, right? So audio fakes, let's get into that. Romance scams, again, here's Yanni sending grandma a audio clip of, professing his love. Well, there's plenty of material to get these audio clips from out there. So that's not really a problem, right? We get that stuff together. What about election influencing again? What about intercepting a fake phone call? Okay. Hey, here's, so-and-so politician speaking about something absolutely mind-blowing in this thing and releasing that, like, just like with the videos. And then turning down to, again, I'd mentioned it before, and this is why I mentioned it. What about CEO fraud or different types of business email compromise? One of the counters we recommend to people is don't wire that money until you've actually talked to the person who said that you need to transfer $1 million, right? Whether it's a CEO, CFO, whatever, there need to be processes in place for that. Well, imagine they get the email and now they get a phone call just a couple minutes later. And it's the CEO saying, hey, I sent you an email, need you to take care of that. I'm in a meeting, gotta go, bye. Okay. It sounds like the CEO. maybe they pulled information, or they pulled the audio clips off of some talk or presentation the CEO gave or news article or whatever. But now the person just goes, oh, well, it's been validated in my mind because I got the phone call, just like text messages work, right? Doing the hybrid attacks with an email and a text message. But being able to put that together, now the person is just going to go, oh, it must be real, and fire off the money. That's a dangerous thing. This is why when I talk about policies for this sort of thing, I say there has to be a call back to a known good number, not somebody calling you or giving you a number in the email, right? That will help counter this. But imagine how people let their guard down as soon as they get that second form of validation. That's where I think we're going to see a lot of this kind of stuff going on. Now, there was this story, you may have seen it. They claim that this is how this happened for a CEO fraud wire transfer. It was quite a bit of money got transferred. And they claim that it was the CEO that called. Now, what I found is there's no supporting evidence yet that this was a deep fake call, although they tried to lean it on that. It could have very easily been a voice actor, somebody with a close, voice to the person. I think that's probably more likely. However, this kind of stuff is already kind of going on with faking the voice. Now, when I was at RSA this year, that seems like so long ago. When I was at RSA this year, there was actually a booth that was set up, and their whole thing was looking for deep fakes and audio calls. And their clientele was it was call centers, essentially. Big call centers, things like that. And I actually learned a lot from them about how call centers work, where they basically start building a score on you for fraud when you call in. So did you call from a mobile number? Is it already a known number? Are you connecting from, a known place, location, whatever, if they can get that? But they're also starting to listen to the voice. And their whole sales thing was about being able to identify whether the voice was a digitized voice or not. And essentially, once you finally get to that person in the call center to speak to them, that person in the call center has basically a flag that says, hey, this is how much we trust this person. It basically gives a numeric grading on the possibility of fraud in this. And I believe it ties into some of those times where they'll ask you to verify another piece of information. That may be because something happened, But I did ask the guy, I said, how many times have you actually seen in a verified way that this has happened in the real world? And of course, he pointed to this story right here. And I said, well, it really wasn't verified in any way, shape, or form. Tell me, how many of you seen verified? And he couldn't give me an answer to that. And that's okay. That's all right, because I think it's going to start happening. And it's good that we're thinking about that, but be careful from some of the snake oil that's still going out on this. But I think this is going to be a very, very powerful way to weaponize this sort of voice cloning stuff. And the activity that I've been seeing lately on that voice cloning stuff there makes me believe that there's a lot of interest in getting this stuff up and running well. And so I think we're going to see in the next couple of years where it's actually a very believable voice that's coming out of these things. So let's talk about how we detect these. Speaking with the gentleman that I was talking about there at RSA, how they did it. Well, the artifacts always remain. And this is video, this is audio, this is whatever. There's always going to be artifacts. When you do deep fake videos, there's going to be smoothing of the pixels around where the two faces are blended. Okay. There's some ways to try to get around that. Now, if you do it in, say, high res, say you do it in HD, and you do all of your cloning there, and then re-encode it a couple times. If you've ever seen the pictures that have been uploaded and recompressed a couple of times, they just fall apart. Same with videos. So if you introduce some of that stuff to it, you can kind of fake some of this fake stuff out, right? And it can hurt the detection of it too when it comes to looking at the digital artifacts. But you always have some sort of artifact when the video or audio is running, the compression piece. In sound, our brains do some pretty cool stuff. Again, we've all seen those, the text things where the first and the last letter or, whatever are correct and in the middle isn't, but our brain still kind of makes that out. We do the same thing with sounds. Our brain pieces these things together, even if it's not perfect, and gives it to us perfect. We see this when we talk to people with strong accents sometimes, where our comprehension lags a minute or so, or maybe not a minute, but a few seconds behind. If you've ever been in a conversation where your comprehension lags behind, that's because your brain is taking sounds that don't make sense and building it into things that do. Well, a lot of times what happens is we use sounds in words or phrases that our tongue cannot be making the same sound that quickly following up. So we actually adjust to the sounds that we make pretty regularly, depending on the sentence we're saying. Now, the AI doesn't do that. So it may put two sounds together that you physically can't make, but because of the way it's all done, it sounds good, and you won't notice the difference between if a real person says it. But digitally, you will see that, and you can see that. There are going to be artifacts in that. This is where using AI to detect AI can be a pretty powerful thing. There will be automation for all of this stuff. If I'm not mistaken, YouTube, Facebook, and them, they're already kind of looking for deep fakes and looking for some of this stuff through the software as well already when things are being uploaded. And of course, they're tagging things, not necessarily removing them. And that's a whole nother hot topics. But using a neural network to detect these fakes, I think, is where we're going to be able to have the most success in this. And that's kind of what they were doing in that RSA guy. They were looking at the audio that was coming in, analyzing it, and looking for things like that in order to help influence that trust score, if you will, when you get to the person. This is going to be the biggest way that we're going to be able to detect fakes. Now, when it comes to these things, man, we all have biases. We absolutely have biases. And deepfakes are going to enhance these prejudices and biases. Now, what's going to happen is we have to realize if it's something that we agree with already, we are going to want to believe it. Therefore, it takes more for us to disbelieve something we kind of already believe in than to throw something under the bus that we don't already, right? Let's think about this. This is us as humans, and we have to be honest with ourselves about this. If you see something in social media that aligns with your political views, how prone are you to be critical about it and or go peel apart all of the facts behind it? You're probably not. This is just a human thing. But if it's something that disagrees with you, you already disagree, and you're going to look for those things that prove the negative as opposed to proving the positive. I hope that makes sense to you. But what it all boils down to is you don't need high tech to manipulate people who want to believe something. We see this again in romance scams all the time. You throw something up there and you say, hey, look, grandma, this is a picture of the person you're talking to that says they're a doctor when actually they're a car salesman in Des Moines, Iowa. That's their real persona. And then when they go back and they challenge the person on that, then they say something like, oh, yeah, well, I have to hide that, my identity a little bit because so-and-so. And the person wants to believe the lie behind the deception. And it's a crazy thing. If you've ever dealt with people in romance scams, they will continue to justify what they're seeing over and over again, regardless of the proof you throw at them. So the truth is out there. We have to care enough to look for it. This sort of technology is definitely going to be making things tougher for us to be able to do this, to be able to determine the truth. So how do we defend ourselves and our organizations, man? Honestly, all of these sorts of attacks generally in social engineering, they're going to rely on an emotional aspect. So if you get an email, a text message, something like that, and it gets you riled up, you see a social media post, it gets you riled up, be very, very cautious, okay? It doesn't mean it's automatically an attack or it's a fake, but these are the ploys that are being done. The social engineering, they leverage greed, right? The Nigerian prince, right? How long has he been trying to give away money, right? Money for nothing sort of thing. Curiosity, clickbait ads, right? You won't believe what we caught this person doing, blah, 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 blah. Or the top 5 things that number 4 will blow your mind, right? These are information gap theory sorts of things. And it's a pattern interruption theory as well. But basically what they do is they give you a little bit of information, don't give you the rest. You have the FOMO, fear of missing out, and it drives people to click. That's why we see them everywhere, because it actually works. It's the emotional trigger that pulls us into these things. We don't want to be left out and not know the answer to that. So curiosity is great. Obviously, self-interest always. Now, urgency is interesting because I had someone at one talk tell me that they actually saw a phishing email that was no urgency, right? And I was like, you mean that this phishing email came in? It's like, whenever you get around to it, if you feel like it, do this, this, and this. And they were like, yeah, I personally have never seen a phishing attack, a smishing attack, or even a vishing attack that doesn't have a sense of urgency. You know, my car warranty is going to expire ASAP. Call us now, or press 1 to talk to somebody who's going to rip you off. There's always urgency behind that. SMS texts, the whole, hey, your account may have been compromised. Log in now. There's a sense of urgency implied right there. None of it's like, don't really care. So if there's urgency, be careful. Doesn't mean it's an attack. Usually going to be there. Be careful. Fear is an interesting thing. Fear gets people either to engage or back away very, very quickly. It's kind of a weird sort of thing. More than fear, outrage and anger drives human anger. And that's why we'll see a lot of this stuff in there. The stuff I'm talking about here, with the social media especially. Outrage and anger are the number 1 and 2 ways to get people to take action. It's a very, very powerful way to do that. But fear can do it too, right? We've even seen scams. If y'all saw this, I think it was last year. We saw some stuff going on like in Southern California, where a parent would get a call from a scammer saying, hey, we know little Johnny went to this junior high school. We picked him up on the way to school and have little Johnny. If you don't pay us money within the next hour, you'll never see little Johnny again. If you contact the news, or you contact the police or the school, little Johnny's a goner, right? And so they were trying to get people to send them ransom money based on that. Meanwhile, little Johnny's fat, dumb, and happy at school. Nothing has happened, but they use social media to figure it out. Now, that's a fear-based thing that would terrify you for real as a parent, right? Whether you believe it or not. I mean, when you're under that kind of stress and that kind of concern, especially if they can give you some details about little Johnny, and maybe they see the schedule from your social media posts or whatever. We grabbed him on the way to swim practice. Make it real. That's some terrifying stuff that really, really messes with how people can apply critical thinking. And of course, helpfulness is another one. The old, I'm stuck in the UK. Somebody robbed me. I have no money or passport. I need money to get home. Please help me. Or someone calling the elderly folks saying, hey, this is little Johnny's lawyer. He got put in jail for something that is absolutely not his fault, but we need to bail him out. He said that you could help. Well, the elderly folks tend to be very helpful. They tend to have some money, stowed away on occasion. And that's why that scam works. So anytime you get these kind of emotional urges or emotional kick in the pants, be super cautious about what's going on. And we need to relay that information to our family, to our friends, to our employees, to basically everyone we can talk to. Try to reapply the critical thinking part. Move out of that, system 1 reactive type stuff into critical thinking pieces, and it will benefit you greatly. Now, this is something I do put up because people absolutely love this when it comes to employees, or it doesn't matter, parents, whatever. Put it up, print it out. I put the PDF link to this in the Discord chat as well. Print this up. Basically, it's red flags, and it helps people say, hey, I got an email at 2:00 in the morning on a Saturday from my HR department, and that's kind of weird. I should be cautious. Now, what do I look at, right? Oh, okay, so I can hover the link. I can do this. It's a cheat sheet for people with phishing and scams. I love, 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 love this little PDF. It's free. Please, for the love of all that's good in the world, get this to people that are prone to this sort of thing. Love my mother-in-law to death. I cannot tell you how many different versions of Mahjong she has on her computer, because she downloads stuff and installs it all the time, right? And she believes a lot of this stuff. I get questions about emails. On the flip side, her husband, my father-in-law, is the guy that wants the computer turned off every night because the Russians will hack it if it's turned on and connected to the internet. So you got weird dichotomies there, but this kind of stuff is really, really good for those folks. So having said that, this is what I got for the slides today. I'm going to pop on over there to the Discord channel in a minute here, and I'm willing to answer any questions you have there. This is my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me and email on those. The @Erich Kron, that Twitter handle there, is the one I use most of the time. It's Mad Squirrel. And then my KB4, my KnowBe4 one as well. But my primary one is @Erich Kron. I really look forward to hearing from some of you. Love talking about this stuff. If you want to learn a little bit more about it, feel free to reach out to me. Again, I'm going to pop over to the Discord channel here in a few minutes and be there if you guys want to ask some questions. So having said that, I just want to thank you all for everything. Really appreciate you being here and listening to this, and hope to have some good conversations with you. Thank you all very much.